The image is burned into our collective consciousness. A single gleaming red button, a simple push and the world ends. It's a staple of thrillers, a symbol of ultimate power and ultimate terror. But is it real? Is the fate of humanity truly resting on one switch? Welcome to Nations Uncoded. Today, we're cracking the code on one of the most terrifying concepts in modern history, the nuclear button. We'll strip away the fiction to reveal the complex, hidden reality of how nuclear war could actually begin. We'll explore the real systems designed to control the apocalypse, and then journey back to 5 moments, 5 harrowing near misses, when humanity stood perilously close to Armageddon, revealing the profound fragility of peace in the nuclear age. First, we'll decode the launch procedures of the world's largest nuclear powers. Then, we'll relive the chilling stories of when those systems faltered, pushing us to the very edge. Let's begin by shattering the myth. There is no single, easily accessible button that can instantly trigger nuclear Armageddon. The reality is far more complex, a carefully constructed high-stakes system involving people, procedures, technology, and immense responsibility, designed for scenarios almost too terrifying to contemplate. In the United States, the system is built on 2 fundamental principles: absolute civilian control and the need for blinding speed. The ultimate authority to order the use of nuclear weapons rests solely and exclusively with the president. This isn't a committee decision. It is concentrated in one individual to ensure the military cannot initiate nuclear war independently. This sole authority structure is a direct legacy of the Cold War. The primary fear was a sudden, massive Soviet nuclear strike, perhaps involving missiles launched from submarines just off the coast, reaching targets in 15 minutes or ICBMs flying over the pole in 30 minutes. To deter such an attack, the U.S. adopted a posture that allowed for a rapid retaliatory launch, potentially even launch on warning, firing missiles based on sensor data indicating an incoming attack, before those missiles could destroy U.S. forces or command structures. This necessitated a system where the president could make a decision and have it executed within minutes. Key tools in this process are the famous nuclear football and the lesser-known Biscuit. The football, officially the Presidential Emergency Satchel, isn't a launch device itself. It's essentially a secure mobile communication center packed into a briefcase, containing authentication equipment and pre-approved nuclear strike options, ranging from limited attacks to all-out retaliation. A military aide carrying the football remains near the president at all times. The president, meanwhile, carries the Biscuit, a card bearing daily changing codes used to authenticate their identity and confirm a launch order. 1. President initiates conference call, often via aide football. 2. Consultation with advisors, optional, time permitting. 3rd President authenticates identity to NMCC using Biscuit code. 4th President specifies launch option. 5th, NMCC formats and transmits Emergency Action Message, EAM, via multiple channels to U.S. Strategic Command and launch crews. 6. Launch crews, silo sub-bomber, verify codes and execute. So how does it work in practice? If the president decides to launch, whether in retaliation or hypothetically as a first strike, the process is designed for speed. The president would use the football's communications gear to initiate a secure conference call with top military advisors, such as the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, typically patched through the National Military Command Center, NMCC, at the Pentagon. Consultation is possible, even expected in many scenarios, but crucially, it is not required. The final decision rests with the president alone. To issue the order, the president identifies themselves to the NMCC duty officer using the challenge codes from the Biscuit. Once authenticated, the president specifies which pre-planned attack option to execute. The NMCC then formats this order into an emergency action message, containing the war plan, launch timing, and crucially, the codes needed to unlock the weapons, permissive action links, or PLs. This message is transmitted through redundant communication networks to the launch crews, in underground missile silos, aboard submarines, and on strategic bombers. At the launch sites, Crews verify the message's authenticity. For land-based missiles, for instance, 2 officers in separate launch centers must concur. If validated, missiles can leave their silos in mere minutes. Submarine-launched missiles might take around 15 minutes. Once launched, these weapons cannot be recalled. This emphasis on speed creates a dangerous paradox. The system is optimized to ensure the U.S. can retaliate even under direct attack, preventing a decapitation strike that eliminates leadership or command capabilities. However, this very speed drastically compresses the time available for deliberation, for confirming the reality of an attack, for seeking counsel, or for catching errors. A system designed to guarantee deterrence under the worst circumstances simultaneously increases the risk of an accidental or mistaken launch, triggered by false alarms or misjudgment under unbearable pressure. Russia employs a system with outward similarities, but potentially crucial differences in philosophy. They also utilize nuclear briefcases known as Cheget. However, unlike the U.S. system centered on the president, Russia maintains 3 Chegets, typically held by the president, the Minister of Defense, and the Chief of the General Staff. While precise details remain guarded, this distribution suggests a potential requirement for consensus or confirmation from at least 2 of these 3 leaders to authorize a launch, particularly for a first strike. This contrasts sharply with the U.S. president's sole authority. The Kazbek automated command and control system links these leaders and the strategic forces. Russia's official doctrine permits nuclear use in response to an attack with weapons of mass destruction against Russia or its allies, or in response to conventional aggression that threatens the very existence of the Russian state. Adding another layer of complexity is the rumored and occasionally acknowledged perimeter system, often dubbed Dead Hand in the West. Believed to have been developed in the Soviet era and still operational, perimeter is described as a semi-automatic fail-safe system. It's designed to monitor for signs of a nuclear attack on Russia, seismic, radiation, communication network status. If it detects a devastating strike and cannot establish communication with surviving leadership, it could autonomously launch special command rockets that would then broadcast launch orders to Russia's remaining nuclear forces, ensuring retaliation even if the top command is eliminated. Comparing the 2 superpowers reveals different approaches born from the shared fear of a decapitating first strike. The U.S. system prioritizes speed and relies on the singular judgment of the president, accepting the inherent risk that speed entails regarding potential errors or false alarms. The Russian system appears to build in more human checks at the top level, potentially slowing the process but reducing the chance of a single individual initiating launch based on flawed information. Yet, Russia also developed the ultimate automation in perimeter, a technological backstop against decapitation, suggesting a different calculation of where the greatest risks lie, perhaps weighting the risk of decapitation higher than the risk of accidental launch via automation. Compared to the U.S. focus on human control, albeit singular. Both systems, in their own way, grapple with the terrifying logic of nuclear deterrence. These complex systems, designed to manage the unthinkable, are operated by humans and reliant on technology. Both can fail. The risks aren't merely theoretical, they are etched into the secret history of the nuclear age. Technical malfunctions, from faulty computer chips to misinterpreted sensor data. Human errors driven by stress, misjudgment, or failure to follow protocol, and political miscalculations during intense crises have all brought the world terrifyingly close to the brink. Let's examine 5 such incidents. Incident 1, Cuban Missile Crisis, the submarine commander's choice. October 27, 1962. The Cuban Missile Crisis is at its fever pitch. The U.S. has discovered Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba and imposed a naval quarantine. Deep beneath the waves, Soviet submarines patrol, shadowed aggressively by the U.S. Navy. Unknown to the Americans at the time, several of these submarines, including B-59, are armed with torpedoes tipped with nuclear warheads, each capable of obliterating an aircraft carrier group. On October 27th, later called Black Saturday, the most dangerous day of the crisis, U.S. destroyers locate B-59 and begin dropping signaling depth charges, trying to force it to surface. Inside the cramped, sweltering submarine, communications with Moscow are cut off. The captain, Valentin Savitsky, battered by explosions and believing war has already broken out, decides he must act. He orders the nuclear torpedo prepared for firing. The submarine's political officer, Ivan Maslenikov, agrees. However, Soviet protocol for launching this weapon required the unanimous consent of 3 officers on board. Fortunately, the third key figure was Vasily Arkhipov, chief of staff for the entire submarine flotilla, who happened to be aboard B-59. Amidst the panic and fury, Arkhipov keeps his cool. He argues against the launch, reasoning that the American actions are signals, not attacks, and persuades a distraught Savitsky to stand down. A single dissenting voice, backed by procedure, prevented an act that could have instantly escalated the Cuban Missile Crisis into a full-blown nuclear exchange. This incident underscores the immense danger of misinterpretation during crises and the critical, sometimes counterintuitive importance of procedural checks and individual judgment under fire. Incident 2. NORAD's Ghost Attack, November 9, 1979. Fast forward to the late 1970s. The Cold War persists, and both sides rely heavily on complex computer networks for early warning of a missile attack. But technology can betray its masters. On November 9, 1979, during mid-morning hours, a technician at NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, deep inside Cheyenne Mountain, accidentally loaded a training simulation tape into the live operational computer system. Instantly, warning displays at NORAD, the Pentagon's National Military Command Center and Strategic Air Command headquarters, lit up, indicating a massive Soviet attack. First hundreds, then over 1,000 incoming ballistic missiles. Panic ensued. Interceptor aircraft scrambled in the US and Canada. Nuclear bomber crews were alerted, and the entire system braced for impact. It took several agonizing minutes for officials to cross-check the alarming data with raw information from radar sites and satellites, which showed nothing amiss. The alert was canceled. Unbelievably, it happened again. In the dead of night on June 3, 1980, and again on the afternoon of June 6th, NORAD systems once more indicated massive Soviet missile launches. This time, the culprit was traced to the failure of a single minuscule computer chip worth less than 50 cents. During the June 3rd incident, National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski was woken by his military aide with the terrifying news. He waited for confirmation before waking President Carter, receiving a second call moments later, seemingly confirming thousands of missiles. He was reportedly seconds away from advising a full-scale retaliation when a third call reported discrepancies. The alert was false. These incidents starkly revealed the terrifying potential for technical glitches in automated systems to trigger false alarms, pushing decision-makers toward irreversible actions. They highlighted the absolute necessity of redundant verification systems and the vital, if sometimes fallible, role of human oversight in questioning the machine. Incident 3. Stanislav Petrov's gut feeling, September 26, 1983. U.S.-Soviet relations are arguably at their lowest point since Cuba. President Reagan's strong anti-Soviet rhetoric, a massive U.S. military buildup, and the recent Soviet downing of Korean Airlines Flight 007 created a powder keg atmosphere. Soviet leadership, particularly KGB head Yuri Andropov, genuinely feared the U.S. might launch a surprise decapitation strike. Into this cauldron stepped Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov, the duty officer at Serpukhov 15, a secret command center monitoring Soviet early warning satellites. In the early hours of September 26th, the alarms screamed. The OKO satellite system reported that the United States had launched 5 Minuteman intercontinental ballistic missiles. All system checks indicated the satellites were functioning correctly. Soviet military protocol was clear. Petrov was obligated to report the incoming attack up the chain of command. Given the extreme tension, such a report would have almost certainly triggered a Soviet retaliatory launch. But Petrov hesitated. Something felt wrong. He knew the satellite system was new and had experienced glitches. More importantly, his military training and intuition told him a genuine U.S. first strike wouldn't begin with just 5 missiles. It would be a massive, overwhelming salvo. Furthermore, crucial ground-based radar systems showed no incoming targets. Trusting his gut feeling over the computer readouts and against strict protocol, Petrov reported the alert as a system malfunction, not a confirmed attack. He was right. Later investigation revealed the satellites had mistaken the glint of sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds near Montana missile fields for the heat signature of rocket launches. Once again, the world was saved not by the system, but by a human being who dared to question it under unimaginable pressure, highlighting the potentially catastrophic flaws in relying solely on automated warnings, especially under a launch-on-warning doctrine. Incident 4. Able Archer 83. Exercise or attack. November 1983. Just weeks after Stanislav Petrov stared down a false alarm, tensions remained dangerously high. The Soviets, still deeply suspicious of U.S. intentions and shaken by recent events, were primed to expect the worst. It was in this atmosphere that NATO launched Able Archer 83, a command post exercise scheduled for November. Able Archer wasn't a typical drill. It simulated the entire process of escalating from conventional conflict to nuclear war, culminating in a practice run-through of procedures for authorizing nuclear release. What made this exercise particularly alarming to Moscow were several elements of unprecedented realism. The use of new, unique communication codes, periods of radio silence mimicking real pre-attack behavior, the simulated raising of alert levels to DEFCON, the highest level signaling imminent war, and even the participation of high-level political leaders like British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. Soviet intelligence agencies, particularly the KGB, observed these activities with growing alarm. Conditioned by paranoia and the belief that NATO might use a large-scale exercise as cover for a genuine surprise attack, they interpreted the realism of Able Archer not as simulation, but as actual preparation for war. In response, Soviet nuclear forces in East Germany and Poland were placed on heightened alert, bombers were loaded with weapons, and SS-20 intermediate-range missiles were readied for launch. The exercise concluded on November 11th without NATO forces realizing the panic they had inadvertently induced on the other side. It was only later, through intelligence reports and defector accounts, that the West understood how dangerously close Able Archer 83 had come to triggering a preemptive Soviet strike based on a catastrophic misinterpretation of intentions. The incident serves as a chilling reminder of how easily signals can be misread during periods of intense hostility, and how even routine military activities can spiral towards disaster when viewed through a lens of fear and suspicion. Incident 5. Yeltsin and the Rocket, January 25, 1995. The Cold War was officially over, but the nuclear infrastructure remained on hair-trigger alert. On January 25, 1995, Russian early warning radar stations detected a rocket launching from off the coast of Norway near Andoya. The rocket climbed rapidly, and its speed and trajectory initially mimicked those of a U.S. Trident D-5 submarine-launched ballistic missile. Worse, its flight path seemed consistent with a potential high-altitude electromagnetic pulse EMP attack designed to blind Russian command and control systems as the prelude to a larger strike. Within minutes, the Russian military went to full combat readiness. In Moscow, President Boris Yeltsin, Defense Minister Pavel Grachev, and Chief of the General Staff Mikhail Kolesnikov were alerted. For the first and only confirmed time in history, they activated their Cheget nuclear briefcases, opening the communication lines needed to authorize a retaliatory launch. For several tense minutes, the Russian leadership debated whether they were under attack and if they needed to launch their own nuclear arsenal before hypothetical incoming warheads arrived. Fortunately, radar operators continued tracking the object. They quickly determined its impact point would be far out in the Norwegian Sea, not on Russian territory. The alert was called off. The offending object was, in fact, Black Brant 12, a four-stage scientific-sounding rocket launched by Norwegian and American scientists to study the aurora borealis. Although Norway had notified Russia of the planned launch weeks in advance, as required by international protocols, the information had somehow failed to reach the on-duty officers at the Early Warning Radar Center. This post-Cold War scare demonstrated that the dangers of miscalculation and system failure persisted. It highlighted the continued risks posed by launch-on-warning postures and the critical importance of functioning communication and notification procedures, even between former adversaries. These 5 incidents, drawn from a longer list of accidents and close calls, paint a sobering picture. They reveal that the complex systems built to control nuclear weapons are inherently vulnerable. Technology malfunctions, procedures fail or are ignored, communication breaks down, and human beings under immense stress can make mistakes or, sometimes, life-saving judgments. Across these events, disaster was often averted not solely by design, but by the intervention of individuals who questioned the data, like Petrov and Arkhipov, by redundant checks that caught errors given enough time, like NORAD, or sometimes by what can only be described as sheer luck, like the safety switches that miraculously held on a nuclear bomb dropped over North Carolina in 1961. The fact that nuclear war hasn't happened by accident or miscalculation owes a significant debt to fortune, alongside the safeguards built into the systems. This reliance on luck, given the stakes, is perhaps the most chilling lesson of all. Our journey has taken us from the simplistic myth of the red button to the complex, terrifying reality of nuclear command and control. We've seen how the United States and Russia developed intricate systems, prioritizing speed or checks, relying on human authority or automated backups, all grappling with the paradox of deterring nuclear war while risking its accidental ignition. More importantly, we've relived 5 harrowing moments when the systems faltered, when technology failed, when humans erred or showed incredible judgment, and when political tensions nearly boiled over into catastrophe. These near misses teach us profound lessons: that nuclear command is fragile, that risks are persistent, and that luck has undeniably played a role in our survival thus far. They underscore the vital importance of vigilance, robust diplomacy, verifiable arms control agreements, and clear, reliable communication channels. Are we safer today? Nuclear arsenals are being modernized. New potential threats like cyber attacks on command systems and the integration of artificial intelligence into military decision-making introduce new variables, and geopolitical tensions remain high. The chilling lessons from these close calls, these moments when humanity stood unknowingly at the precipice, are not relics of history. They are urgent warnings for our present and our future. Understanding these risks is the first step toward ensuring they never become reality. What do you think? Which near-miss chills you the most? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this exploration valuable, please like this video and subscribe to Nations Uncoded for more deep dives into the hidden forces and critical histories shaping our world.